Well, greetings. This is LMS Tactical, and I hope everybody's doing good. I'm I'm putting this video out on YouTube, but I'm also going to strip the audio and throw it out on my podcast as well. This is going to be a long video or podcast, depending on where you're listening to this at. This is a video that I've been contemplating for years as to when and whether, quite frankly, whether or not I should even make it. Once I decided that I would make it, I've had to kind of get the guts up to make it. And I know that sounds funny for those of you that follow me and know that it would be kind of a weird subject that would shy me away from making a video. Some of you that know me very close, family members, know exactly what I'm getting ready to say here. So you're going to have to open up your minds, and I'm going to give a couple disclaimers before I dive into the story, and a couple of points for context. Let me just say, first of all, that I know a large group of my subscribers on this channel are from South Africa, and they're good God-fearing Christians, and they are, I don't want to insult anybody because I respect everybody's beliefs for the most part, but some people are such fundamentalists that they don't have much room for deviation from what is or is not in the Bible. That being said, if you are put off by strange things that aren't mentioned in the Bible, such as UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, that kind of thing, then this is not a video for you to watch. For anyone else, I'm going to say this. This is obviously going to be this is a true story of a Bigfoot sighting that I had in May of 1980. I know that was a long time ago. And I want to give a little bit about that, about why it's taken this long before I get into the story, and why I've decided to make a video after all these years. So if you've never heard of me and you just stumbled onto this channel, I am a retired Los Angeles police officer. I'm a former Army paratrooper, and I did 12 years as a federal agent with an Inspector General's office out of Washington, D.C., where I basically handled white-collar type crime, fraud, and was a firearms and tactics instructor. That right there, that in between that, I did other things. I did my own private investigation and blah, blah, blah. So I've been in law enforcement, pretty much my whole adult life, with the exception of the military. But in any of the fields that I've chosen for career, coming out and telling everybody that you saw a Bigfoot up close and personal would not be the best thing that you could do, especially when you're carrying a badge and a weapon. So for that reason, and for other reasons that we'll get into a little bit later, I have some theories too on some of the silence. I know it sounds weird. It'll all make sense. Just give it time. I'm obviously a little nervous talking about this. I don't know why. It's a weird thing to think about, because here's the deal. When I watch TV, I tend to watch a lot of the reality shows, and I notice that an awful lot of them are about strange phenomenon and cryptids, I guess they're called now, and Bigfoot specifically. And can you just imagine? You got to open up your mind now and just imagine that there were rumors that there were star-spangled widgets that would appear from time to time, whatever the hell that is, and you happen to see one up close and personal. But now for the rest of your life, you're watching all these shows debating whether or not star-spangled widgets exist. Can you imagine how frustrating that is? I'm watching these shows where you get experts, somebody will say they saw a Bigfoot, they'll reenact it. And then, in some cases, experts will talk about why that's not possible. Other experts, will talk about why that is possible. And you're just sitting there thinking, my God, it's like, I'm broadcasting out of Virginia now. It's like watching TV shows where people debate whether or not Virginia actually exists. If that makes any sense at all. It's just very frustrating. But I get it, because not everybody sees them. So here's that's basically the main reason why it's taken me so long. So here, let me just jump into it and tell you the best I can. I also want to give you a reference though, so write this down. It's um, I just Googled it. I didn't realize how long ago this had been. Uh, I did report this to an agency called the Bigfoot Research Organization, and you can Google BFRO. And if you put in the search, there's two ways to get to my report, which I made this report September 9th, 2007. And it's pretty detailed. There is something missing in that report that I'm going to it's not a big deal, but I'm going to explain it and go over it and why it's not in that report. Uh, but the report number is 21674, 21674. And that's at the BFRO, the Bigfoot Research Organization, and they cover Bigfoot sightings throughout the country. If you can't remember all that, just go to if you search by region, go to Los Angeles, and then you'll see, I think I'm the second report down, it's a Class A sighting from 1980. But um, I went through that and gave as much detail as I could recall at the time, and I still left something out, which was odd. So here's what happened. Uh, in 1980, a friend of mine, I'll just call him Craig, that's his first name. My buddy and I, we were high school friends, and we had opted to join the Army. And so we both signed up for different MOSs. I was going to be a paratrooper and ultimately did that, and he was going to do whatever he was going to do. And uh, we were both coming out of some kind of rough situations in terms of our home life. And because of all of the things that were involved in that, us getting ready to go in the military and what was going on at home, my oldest sister, I'm the youngest of four, my oldest sister, her and her husband, Tom, they lived in a small house in a place called Green Valley, California. And Green Valley is sort of in the high desert north of Los Angeles, so um, it's in there's surrounded by forest, and it's pretty cool. So we went up there, and we both were going to live with them, and then Craig was going to go in the Army a month, I think, ahead of me, and then I would follow him in, because of our respective jobs. But at any rate, we were up there for that summer, and we were very excited about becoming these badass soldiers, and so we were doing everything we could to prepare for it. We would get up at the crack of dawn, and we would run up this massive hill that was by my sister's house, and we'd jog for miles and had blisters on our feet, and we were doing everything we could to toughen up, push-ups and sit-ups, and just young kids that were getting ready to be men, and we were doing what we thought we needed to do. And then we decided that we needed to experience living rough, living in the outdoors. We came up with this plan of going to this campground. It's an old campground from the 20s out there off of San Francisco. I can't pronounce it. I never could pronounce the street. San Francisco Road. And there's a turnoff that gets back up into the brush and up into the wilderness on the way to Grass Mountain. And it's very isolated. And we decided that we were going to go spend the 7 days there and just learn how to tough it out and live outside and blah, blah, blah. 18 years old. So, sorry about the allergies here. I apologize. Bad allergies tonight. So, my brother-in-law, they offered to give us a ride, but oh no, we wanted to be like soldiers, and we decided to march it. And I honestly couldn't tell you how far it was. It was probably maybe 10 miles away. And we headed out in the morning, backpacks full of stuff. My brother-in-law gave us he gave us a shotgun and an M1 rifle for protection, because after all, there were no cell phones and we're going to be on our own. Two kids in those days walking down the road in the mountains with rifles and shotguns would not even, nobody blink an eye back then. And so he gave us ammunition for those, for our self-defense against people, and that kind of thing. Plus there were rattlesnakes and typical things that you would have to worry about. And the agreement was that they would come and visit us every other day at a minimum, and bring us, resupply us with lemonade and food or whatever, and just check on our well-being. It was a quick drive from their house. And so off we went. We marched, spent, you know, left in the morning, and I can't remember what time we ended up getting back to this turnoff. And we went in about 3 or 4 miles off of the road on a dirt road that goes back into the deeper remoteness of the area there. And as the road basically hugs a mountain on one side, and then on the other side, on the left, as you're going up this fire road, it drops down into a little area where there's a creek running through it. And we found a little flat spot about, I don't know, 3 or 4 miles back in off of the main road. And we thought, hey, this is great. And we set up our tent, and it was, getting late. We set up the tent. We had something to eat, I think. And then the sun went down, and we were in the tent, and we were talking. I can't remember what we were talking about, just, whatever guys talk about at that age. And at some point in the night, we heard this huge branch break. Like, you can hear things that are super loud because you got a mountain on one side and a mountain on the other side, and we're kind of in this valley. So everything's very hollowy and echoey. And we heard this like a big log breaking, and that really got our attention. We're like, holy shit, somebody's out there. So, we jump outside, and I've got the M1 and he's got the shotgun, the 12 gauge shotgun, and we hear somebody walking. You can't see anything. We've got flashlights, but you can't see past the range of the light. It's just pitch black. And we can hear these heavy steps, crashing along at a very slow pace, going from left to right. And I start yelling, hey, we know you're out there, stupid shit that it's embarrassing now. But I literally was like, hey, we have guns, and if you don't answer up, we're going to start shooting. And, later on I became a firearms instructor, and I can't believe I did this, but it just kept ignoring us. And so at one point I said, I'm going to fire. And I did. I fired a few rounds out of that M1 right toward the sound. I mean, can you imagine if it was, a deaf ranger? I don't think there'd be a deaf ranger, but not something that's safe to do, obviously. And extremely loud. It's important that you understand how loud these gunshots were, because they echoed off of the mountains, and they were pretty imposing sounds. Boom, 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 with the flame and the whole bit, because it's dark. And as the sound echoed away, to our disbelief, the steps started again. Now I got to stop the story here, because this is where I left something out in the report to the BFRO. And I'm going to deviate from this story. I told you this was going to be a long video, but this is all important thing, all very important stuff. So, years later, after all this happened, I know I'm jumping around, but I have to do. There's no way to avoid it. I got out of the Army, and I was a cop, and now we're well into the 90s, and I somehow found the contact information after a lot of work of my buddy Craig, who I hadn't talked to in years, and he was living, I think, in Montana, and I got a hold of him. And when he answered the phone, I hadn't heard his voice since, we were kids. And the very first thing I said to him, I said, Craig, before we talk about anything, I said, I need you to tell me from beginning to end. And he cuts me off. He says, about the Bigfoot. And the reason I did that was every time I had thought about it, it seemed so surreal. I was starting to wonder if I made the whole thing up or if I had dreamt it. I mean, it was just bizarre. I know that sounds weird, but the way the memories presented themselves was weird too. So it was hard for me to believe that it actually happened. So he starts to tell the story from beginning to end. And when he got to this part, he mentioned something that I had totally forgotten. And that's my dog barking in the background, or my wife's dog. After I fired those shots, these huge, you can't see it on your hand, these giant rocks, like big boulders, like a bowling ball, the size of a bowling ball, came flying over the trees and landed right into the clearing where our tent was. And I had totally forgotten that. The minute he said it, I was like, oh my God, man, I forgot about that. Later on, he told another part of the story, because he went through the whole part that I'm going to tell you. And he mentioned a dog, a big Doberman Pinscher that was running around back there in the middle of the night. And I had forgotten that too. It really didn't matter. It had nothing to do with the Bigfoot story, but it was strange that I had forgotten those two things. The rocks was an important thing, because we both looked at each other, as these rocks flew into the clearing. That was all we had to see. Now, mind you, now we'll get back to me telling the story. I'll get back to Craig later. But mind you, at no time were we thinking Bigfoot. There's just no way we were thinking Bigfoot. We weren't sure what we were thinking. We didn't know what we were dealing with. But we did grab our jackets and left everything there. We had set up, all our food and everything. We just left it all right there. Tent, sleeping bags, everything, and just took off with I had the M1, he had the shotgun, and we took off on that dirt road, and we ran all the way back to the main road nonstop. And now it's, who knows what time it was, 11 o'clock, whatever. And it's one lane in each direction through the mountains there, and no traffic. And here we are. There's a cement, what do you call it, like a gully for the rainwater to wash down. And we laid down in this little gully right on the side of the road. And that's where we spent the night. And we stayed up all night long. And that's when this dog came running at some point. Sorry about that. Whenever I talk about something like this, I get all stressed out for some reason. I don't know why. It's not a bad memory. It's not a bad story. It just has that weird effect. Maybe it's because I've been holding it in for so many years. I don't know. So, where was I? So we're, throughout that night, and it was a very long night. I mean, every now and again, man, some 18-wheeler you'd hear them coming from a long way away, and they'd come roaring by, and that kind of made us feel like, there's civilization out there, because we felt so isolated. It was a weird feeling. And when the sun came up, we, of course, were dog tired, and the stress makes you tired, blah, blah, blah. We decided that we would head back and see what was left of our stuff. We were a lot braver of the daylight. Now, we weren't thinking Bigfoot, by the way. We were thinking monster. We didn't know what we were dealing with. We weren't sure. I don't think we were thinking monster, but we were thinking something like, crazy man, whatever. Somebody that's not afraid of guns and somebody that's very strong is what we were thinking to throw these rocks. So we get back there, and to our surprise, everything was exactly where we left it. We expected the tent to be shredded and all the food to be gone and everything rifled through, and nothing was touched. The rocks were still in the clearing. Tent was up. So we really quickly just disassembled the tent and packed everything up, got back up on the road, and we came back in the direction of the highway a couple of miles so that we were closer to the road, still maybe a mile or two out past the road. But there was a flat open area. It was above the creek, and there were no trees in this area. And we decided we were going to spend the rest of the week on the outside. So we put our sleeping bags on a blanket down here, and we never pitched the tent again. We wanted to have a 365-degree view of what was coming so that we could, ensure our safety. We just didn't want to be isolated in the tent. Okay, so here we go. Now we're getting toward the sighting here. So now I'd be less than honest if I didn't say this, because who knows if I'll ever tell these stories. That 7 days, often I have been very close to just sitting down and writing a book called 7 Days, because there were so many weird things that happened during that 7 days that this Bigfoot sighting was just one of many. But it was a life-changing week in many ways. Things happened during that week that were just unbelievable. I mean, and the only people I've ever told those stories to are my immediate family. But very weird things. So the Bigfoot was just one of those things. And here's how that went down. So I don't know, I think it was maybe even the next night or the night after the next. I'm not sure. I'd have to refer to my report. But we had gotten into the habit of walking just before the sun went all the way down behind the mountain. We would walk on the dirt trail there and look for rattlesnakes. We weren't hunters. We didn't like killing animals, but we did shoot rattlesnakes. We're 18 and we thought it was cool. You can see one of the skins up there on top of my arrowhead collection. That's from California, back when I hunted rattlesnakes. So we're out there walking along and we're heading toward the road, okay? And it's getting close to dark. And we're walking side by side. Craig's to my right, to my left is the mountain, to his right is the forest. And he's got the shotgun, I've got the M1, and we're talking. And as we kind of come around this slight little bend in the road, I instinctively put my hand out and pushed him on the chest, and we both stopped and our mouths fell open, and we're staring at no more than 30 feet. I say a typical sedan is 20 feet long, so maximum 30 feet away was a righteous Bigfoot standing on that dirt path, just standing there looking at us. I mean, I want you to see that in your head, because it when you're 18 and you're not thinking about Bigfoot, and there it is, right there, just looking at us. I have people ask me, well, did you smell a weird smell? No, we didn't smell anything. There was just this gigantic, I don't know, man, 9 feet tall, dark, hairy beast. Years later, there was a movie that came out called Harry and the Hendersons, and when I had kids, they loved that movie. Every time we watched that movie, I was like, geez, man, that kind of, he didn't look as goofy as that guy, but that was about the size of it. That's about the size of Bigfoot. So we're all staring at each other. And it's important that for some reason, I just feel that it's important that whenever I mention this is what struck me above and beyond everything on this whole story. This look of absolute indifference on the Bigfoot's face it just embedded itself into my memory. And it's so hard to describe it, but I'll put it to you this way. If you were looking at a Q-tip, you might have the same expression. If somebody showed you a Q-tip, you'd be like, that's not even mildly interesting. This Bigfoot was looking at us, and here we are, like I said, armed. No concern, no fear, no anger, no aggression, no emotion, no nothing. Bored shitless is kind of how it looked. Now, Craig and I, on the other hand, we immediately, at the same time, start backing up. And as we're backing up, I start to say, like Craig's saying, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, should we shoot it? I mean, that was a dumb thing to say, but that's what I said it. And, but we were talking over ourselves, oh my God, are we seeing this? Should we shoot it? What do we do? And as that happens, we took maybe 2 or 3 steps back, and this Bigfoot pivots on its left heel, and just as nonchalantly and bored as if you were gonna, go step into the next room to look out the window or something. Just casually just pivots and just starts walking into the tree line. So he's walking to our right. And I'm like, do we follow it? Should we follow it? And we're like, I don't know. We're just kind of panicking, not sure what to do. And it was weird because, of course, he and I talked about this like all night long that night. But as it was out of sight and walking through the forest, we both realized, probably at the same time, that what we heard, because we heard another big piece of wood break, and we realized that was the exact sound and pace of what was circling us at the campsite the night before. So that's how we put that together, that holy shit, that's who was throwing the rocks. So we did not follow it, and we never saw it again. We were up again all night long talking and, waiting to see the Bigfoot again. And the next morning, not the next morning, I guess maybe around before noon, my brother-in-law, he comes pulling up and he's checking on us. And of course we run out there when he comes driving up, and we're screaming and yelling, Tom, you got to see this. You got to see this. Or you got to hear this. You got to hear this. And we're telling him what we saw, and he was a former Marine, and he didn't have he wasn't open-minded about shit like that. And he had this smirk on his face, like, that's really funny, guys. And it was so frustrating. It's like a scary movie where the ghost disappears and you see the person on the TV is trying to tell somebody, look, it's right here, and then it's gone. He's like kind of giggling at us. We're like, Tom, we're telling you the truth. And we begged him to come to go to the spot where we had seen him. And finally he does. And we get there. And of course, there's freaking footprints right where we said they would be, right where we said it happened. We didn't say there would be footprints there, but we said, this is where we saw him. Let's go look. Craig and I hadn't gone back to that area yet. And we're looking at the footprints, and he bends down, he looks up, and he says, hey, you guys did a really good job. And it was just like a nightmare. We're like, oh my God, this guy thinks we made these footprints. And we follow him, and they get down. There's a little creek before it starts to go up the other side of the mountain there. And it goes across the creek, the tracks, and there was a big giant red ant mound, like a hill full of red ants, and there was a footprint right in the middle. I just remember that distinctly. And we followed these tracks until it basically went from being dirt and grass to rock, and then it began to really slope upwards, and there's no more footprints. So I actually had spoken to Tom, I don't know, 2 years ago, and my brother, because he's my ex-brother-in-law now, and I asked him about that, and if he remembered that, and he did remember it, and he actually believes us, because we convinced him at that time, and I had mentioned it a couple other times throughout the years before I left California, and he knew that I wasn't screwing around when it came to this story. So yeah, back to why I didn't talk about it is something that is a strange. I don't know how to really describe this. I've had a couple of weird things happen in my life, more than a couple, that are either paranormal, supernatural, whatever. And I've always had to keep it stifled because of what I do for a living, what I did for a living. I'm fully retired now, so I can talk. But this story, what I find very strange about this in hindsight is right after that happened, not long after that happened, I go into the Army. Now here I am, 18 years old, having grown up now. I'm wondering why I wasn't telling everybody that would listen the story. And would you believe that I went through the whole, 3 years of the military? I never mentioned it to anybody. I'm sure we must have talked about weird things, but I never mentioned it to anyone. It was like it never happened. And it wasn't until, I don't know, back in the 90s, I guess, early 90s, late 80s. I became a cop in 1984. So probably late 80s, early 90s that I started thinking about it. And I was talking to my ex-wife about it a lot, and, took her to the place where it had happened, and, had kids and told them about it. But it was weird that I kept it quiet for so long and never really thought about it. It was like it just left my mind, man. Almost like it just was hypnotized right out of my head. That happened with a couple of other things too that have only recently started to bother me. Like, what the hell happened on that night? Really crazy things. But my wife just said before I came in here to do this, she says, you see a lot of things in your life. And, it's not unusual from what I understand now that when people that see things like paranormal type shit tend to do it a lot. And those that don't tend to not. And whether or not there's different theories for that. One of the theories is that some people just aren't looking for things. Another theory is that, depending on what the sighting is, certain entities don't want to reveal themselves to everybody. Who knows? I don't know. If you guys have any theories, I'd be all very interested to hear them. But that is my Bigfoot story, and I wanted to get it out here, get it on YouTube, get it out because, listen, in our lifetimes, very soon, this is going to be a question that's going to be answered. Just like people wondering if aliens exist, it drives me nuts. I mean, I'm to the point now where if people think there are no other intelligent life forms in the universe, I almost don't have time for them. It's such a human narcissistic way of thinking, and it just doesn't make any mathematical sense when you're just talking pure numbers and distance and space and size and probability. I just don't have, not to mention the things that I've seen in my life. So maybe I'll save those for another video. You guys let me know what you think. If you've seen something like this, please let me know in the comments. Let me know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone, but I like to hear other people's stories. And don't forget to check it out at Bigfoot Research Organization. If you guys doubt my credentials, I'm sitting here in front of that's my LAPD badge and all my certificates, and my federal stuff is over there. It doesn't mean that I couldn't have been some psychotic officer, but for what it's worth, I swear on everything holy and sacred that what I'm telling you or what I just told you is true. So with that, you guys stay safe, and this is LMS Tactical, and I'm out.